because of you. I may have struck the blow, but you... you are the one that killed her.
What are you so sad for, Spider-Man? What, did someone die? You son of a bitch. Knock, knock. Who's there? Spider-Man! Hey, Spider-Man! Pizza time! You son of a bitch! Woohoo! Alright, that's good.
I have no idea if das Schauspiel oder.
Grant Guy Reviews.
Spider-Man No Way Home. Spoilers, my dudes, if you didn't already guess that, the movie has been out since December, so if you haven't seen it by now and you're watching this video for some reason, don't or do. Please do. Please don't go. I need the money. Guys, this movie is perhaps one of the greatest things I've ever seen, but we're not just talking about the movie today. We're going to be going into the accumulation of how the trilogy ended and what it's going to mean for the future. So aside from this just kind of being a review, it's going to be kind of a bit of a different video. But guys, first off, thank you so much for watching. This is Grant Guy Reviews. First big video. Hope you guys enjoy, but let's get into the meat of it. The Homecoming trilogy comes to a definitive close with over 4 years of character development. By now, everyone knows the world-famous Tom Holland, the star of Spies in Disguise, Uncharted, Spider-Man, obviously, that one weird London movie that had a whole bunch of weird issues. Right off the bat, this is by far much more time that we got to spend with the other two Spider-Men. Tobey Maguire, we got 3 pretty good movies. Third one's a little bit iffy.
See you, chump. What the hell?
Andrew Garfield, we only had 2. But with Tom Holland, we've had Homecoming, Far From Home, Infinity War, Civil War, Endgame. We've had so much time to develop the character. Plus, we have Spider-Man Freshman Year coming out on Disney+. I'm going to be reviewing that too, of course. And will this Spider-Man 3 be good enough to surpass the last Spider-Man 3? Probably not, but it can get pretty darn close. Far From Home left us with the big cliffhanger with Peter's identity being revealed and the even bigger cliffhanger of Sony removing Spider-Man from the MCU, but that was quickly cleared up like a week later. Now, Spider-Man's identity has been revealed a decent amount of times in the comics, but this is the first time it's been done in live action, so I was excited to see where exactly it went with this. Of course, being in the MCU, you now have this ultimate toolbox of a million different things that you can utilize. I know a big one that people were gunning for was Mephiles. Doctor Strange was acting weird, so they thought he was the devil, I guess. But of course, every single Spider-Man movie has to have your little bit of a extra MCU guy in there. So for this one, we have Doctor Strange, and after a botched spell, Tom and Jerry antics happen. For the sake of the review, I'm not going to go over everything that happened in the movie. Otherwise, you could just watch the movie itself. I don't need to tell you the exact story. However, we will be going over the juicy points, the scrumptious points. Let's just get out of the way with the good stuff. My boys, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, are a centerpiece of this film. Like everyone predicted it, but still just being in the theater and just being there as it was happening, like as they just show up on screen, God, just like the audience reactions were mwah, mwah. However, the reaction when Charlie Cox showed up as Daredevil was not nearly as good in my theater, but there were some good reactions out there.
What's the thing on his hand? Find Peter Parker.
Please.
Find Peter Parker.
Please. Please. No.
Hello. I hope it's okay. I just...
Yeah!
This movie is by far the greatest payoff for being a Spider-Man fan. The next best thing would be all three Spider-Men visiting me in the hospital. One thing that I absolutely loved about the Spider-Men in this movie, Spider-Many. I adored how the Spider-Many weren't thrown in for just a quick fight. My biggest fear is that it was going to be the final battle. Tom Holland's losing, and all of a sudden, thwip. What's that? That wasn't Tom Holland's web. Next thing you know, the other two Spider-Men show up, and it's sort of like a lame cameo, and then they're there just for like a quick buck. But the fact that they really helped with Tom's character development throughout the latter half of the entire story, I thought was incredibly well done. The whole reason that Peter recovers is partially because of Andrew and Toby, which I thought was really nice. Tom using the glider, I'm just saying, a good callback. And I'm not going to gloss over it. Green Goblin kills Aunt May. Now, some tears did Daytona 500 down my cheek, I will say. It's sad. If you didn't cry, you're the pussy. But when the Spider-Menies show up and they help Tom get past it, well, not get past it, but just sort of work through it, was by far my favorite part of the entire film, where they come down and they know exactly what he's going through, but they don't shove it in his face. But they both have those deaths in mind. And Andrew's performance specifically, so incredibly well done. I love how they added a little bit extra to his story. The part where he says,
At some point, I stopped pulling my punches. I got rageful. I got bitter. I just don't want you to end up like me.
let's just jump right into the characters. We're already going over them. Andrew Garfield, say what you want about the movies, but my boy, Andrew Garfield, as soon as he came into the movie, I thought he stole the show. I thought he stole the show. Aside from my boy Ned, Dr. Ned, let's go. Andrew did an absolutely phenomenal job. I would have loved to hear him when he got the call to come back as Spider-Man, even if it's just for this one little bit. Now, he didn't take away from Tom or Toby's performance whatsoever, but just the sheer fact that he did so well, it really goes to show, given the right directors and the right writers, I think he does a phenomenal job. The guy's a phenomenal actor anyway. This showed that he can do phenomenal. The part where MJ begins to fall, you already know the amazing reaction from the fans was so good. To have it go from the original scene it's referencing being a laughingstock, then coming over to this and being an emotional roller coaster, such an emotional payoff. I don't normally like when movies do that little wink and nod at you, but this was such a good one. And just the way that he describes his past relationships with having that be his big death and getting that redeeming point. And of course, my boy Toby returns. Let's go. This was by far the most shocking one. If anything, I tried to stay away from spoilers. I didn't see anything for Toby being in the film, but even guessing that he would be there and then finally seeing it was absolutely phenomenal. Just the fact that he walks through and he's so casual. The thing I loved about his performance is how he's matured into this older Peter Parker. As Tobey Maguire has matured, you can just see a stark difference in the way that he looks, a little bit in the way that he talks. You can just see him sort of maturing in his character and as a person. Like during the lab scene when Ned's asking about how all the best friends of them tried killing the Peters. Toby does a phenomenal job of acting just incredibly broken when he's talking about how his best friend died in his arms without really overacting it. I just love all the subtle little references to the films that even if you didn't watch them, you would still understand the characters pretty well. Now, I will say my absolute favorite scene that, again, made me tear up just a little bit was when Doc Ock was talking to Toby's Spider-Man and says, "Warning, this is post-editing Grant. Due to the copyright of this next section, I will be speaking this next scene to the best of my recollection. Spider-Man, did it again. It's so nice to see you. What you been up to?
Poetry, I guess. Damn. It has been a while since I've seen the movie.
And the thing that I love about this is that the last time that you see Doc Ock, you see him changing for the good. So in this universe, the biggest difference is that he was changed for good, but Tom was able to change him for good by actually changing the chip in the back of his neck. Toby was able to do it just by talking him out of it. And going to our last Spider-Man, obviously Tom Holland has had the absolute most and best character development out of the other two Spider-Man. The thing that I love about this character, one of the best differences that I can think of, is you take Spider-Man 3, the scene where Toby is in the black suit and he's just super evil, and you would just think that after 3 movies, that character would have enough development to know to stay away from something like that. I don't know, the whole black suit thing in that movie just kind of bugged me, but the thing that I adored about Tom's character, he only reaches his breaking point when he's lost almost everything. And the Homecoming films do a phenomenal job at utilizing all parts of Peter's personality in his fighting style. Like, for example, when he's fighting Doctor Strange and he uses geometry to defeat him. You know, it's not a fisticuffs battle because he would lose very quickly, but he uses his mind to outsmart him, which I thought was one of the coolest parts of the film. Even just all of the side characters. The side characters in the original 3 films and the Amazing Spider-Man films, I mean, you have Gwen, which was a really good romantic interest, but she didn't really do too much, aside from kind of get in the way. I mean, you know, obviously. And Toby's side characters, I mean, you have James Franco, of course, who's just getting into a whole bunch of trouble recently. And you have Mary Jane, which, again, just gets in the way. But in Tom's universe, MJ's actually a pretty darn good help, and Ned, especially the guy in the chair and the guy with the magic in the chair. Let's go, Ned Strange, let's go. It goes to show that every single part of Tom's life, they've had so much time to develop not just Tom's Peter, but every single one of the side characters. Aunt May has a big part in this film. All of the friends have a big part in the film. And it doesn't feel overbearing. It doesn't feel like they're in the way. They do an incredible job at playing the best sidekick roles out of any Spider-Man film. And can we just give it up for Tom's performance for the last section? By far my favorite scene, when Tom is fighting Goblin for the final time, and you just see how completely broken he is. And immediately I started relating it back to when Andrew's Peter was talking about how he went to a dark place after his loved one died. And you sort of see that mirroring taking place, and it takes the maturest of the Spider-Men to stop him from going too far. Going on to the villains, one of the big reasons that films like Spider-Man 3 and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 sort of hit their end mark was there were too many villains, too many different stories going on at once. But this film does an amazing job at showing that you can throw in so many characters. Happy, Aunt May, 3 Spider-Men, 5 different villains, and it doesn't feel overwhelming. Not every character has to have a specific arc, as long as you give the previously established characters enough time to develop. Now, obviously, if this film had 5 brand new villains, that would be incredibly hard to do. You wouldn't understand any of their motivations. It would just be a confusing mess. So really, it's kind of lucky in the movie's extent that you have this development for all these different characters. But apparently it was rumored that if they weren't able to get the rights to those characters like Doc Ock, Green Goblin, Sandman, all those guys, they would just use some sort of like an alternate Mysterio, and that would still have character development, so I guess it would still work. Starting with what I think is the best performance, very, very close to second, is Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin. Willem Dafoe absolutely took the stage by storm.
Basically, when they pitched it to me before there was even a script, was, listen, I don't want to just pop in there as a cameo or just fill in close-ups. I want to do the action because that's fun for me. And also, it's really impossible to add any integrity or any fun to the character if you don't participate in these things.
One of my favorite things about the character is they sort of explored this a decent amount in the first Spider-Man with Tobey, but in this one, they really show him going from Norbin to Goblin in this really cool transition. The first time you see it is when he goes from Goblin to Norman, when he's by the trash can and he's acting like all crazy and stuff. We do see that in the original film back in his apartment. My favorite thing is you can see the turning point when Norman goes to the Goblin as they're in the apartment, and it's such a cool detail.
You, keep your science fair project away from me!
Hey, it'll work, have faith.
Says the reckless fool who turned himself into a monster.
Not to mention the new suits. Well, it's more the old suit, but with some like purple rags on it and the hoodie. The first fight between Goblin and Tom Spider-Man, where Tom is just beating the absolute shit out of him, and all Goblin can do is laugh. Because at this point in the film, I was talking to a friend, and they were saying how they didn't really make too much sense, because later on, for the final fight, Tom's punches are actually doing something to him. The reason being is because in the first fight, Tom is still trying to fix them. So he's pulling his punches. Alfred's performance as Doc Ock was definitely my second favorite. Just the way he interacts with Tom Spider-Man just felt right at home. And again, the scene with him meeting up again with Toby was beautiful. I love that so much. Skipping through Electro, Sandman, and the Lizard. The Lizard was definitely the lowest point for me. Not really a point to him being there. He was kind of just there for, like, I guess, fan service. Just like, oh, here's the second piece of the Amazing Spider-Man. You know, didn't really need to be there, but it would feel a little bit weird without him. Sandman was definitely my second least favorite. Still had some funny moments and some super cool effects, especially for the final fight. Unfortunately, the actor for him could not be there on set, so the final scene where you actually see the actor is literally just the scene where he turns into Sandman in Spider-Man 3. Electro was definitely half and half for me. I do enjoy Jamie Foxx's performance. They give him a really big kink for power. That is definitely a common theme. Granted, his character didn't have a lot of development in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, aside from...
It's my birthday. Now it's time for me to light my candles.
But his performance was still very enjoyable, and I enjoyed a lot of those fight scenes as well. There are several themes that this film unpacks, grief and loss being the two biggest ones. However, the most important theme, not just for this film, but for the entire trilogy, is that this is a coming-of-age story. Both of the films prior to this, Homecoming and Far From Home, showed Peter having to rely on someone else, but then realizing that they can't always be there for him by the end of the film. In Homecoming, it was relying on Iron Man always being there for him in his suit. In Far From Home, it was trusting someone that he barely knew, and then realizing by the end of it that he can really only trust himself and those incredibly close to him. And you can even see this effect when the other Spider-Men show up first to greet Tom Spider-Man, and how Tom Spider-Man doesn't necessarily trust them at first, but slowly going into it after they start telling him about their pasts. In this film, it's the trust in good nature that sets him back. When you think about it, it's the entire reason that he didn't send them back to their own world. It's with great power comes great responsibility. I know I'm saying that wrong, but it's just the thought process that Aunt May gives to him right before she dies. It was Aunt May's good nature being taunted and ripped from her, as well as a lot of the villains spitting in his face for wanting to save them. After having all of this good nature ripped from Peter, we see this change in mentality. And this change is only reverted back a little bit after we have the interaction with the other Spider guys. I love the filmmaking style. All of the fighting sequences have dynamic camera changes. Even something as simple as the final fight with Green Goblin doesn't just have one standard wide shot. It zooms in and shows the emotions of Tom Spider-Man, the annoyance and the madness with the Green Goblin, especially with Willem Dafoe being really in on the action for a lot of this. One of the absolute best things that I love about the film is the imprint that the other Spider guys have on Tom Spider-Man. With a new trilogy coming out soon, one thing that I realized about this Peter Parker cannot rely on people. As of right now, the only people that he could have relied on do not remember who he is. By the end of the film, MJ, Ned, Happy, whoever still remembered him does not anymore. By far, the saddest thing that I realized is the reason he's not wearing the Stark suit at the end of the film is because it doesn't recognize him.
Wait a minute! Who are you.
Of course, that is the biggest spoiler. Doctor Strange, in order to basically stop the multiverse from cracking and splitting, is he has to do a spell where no one knows who Spider-Man is whatsoever, including all of his friends. So everyone forgets who Peter Parker is. Whether or not we'll see those two again in the next trilogy, I think that we will. Mostly because Ned is also the Hobgoblin at some point. I think that was maybe hinted to in the lab scene.
Do you have a best friend too?
I did.
You did?
He died in my arms. After he tried to kill me. It's heartbreaking.
We know how Homecoming did a bit of a gamer move and didn't really give us an origin story. It was more of a continuation from what we already knew as the origin story. But what I realized at the end of this is that this entire trilogy was the origin story. It's not the origin story that we all know with the spider bite and the labs and all that stuff, but this is perhaps the best origin story I've ever seen. He took the young Peter Parker, aged him through loss and grief, and by the end of the trilogy, by the end of the coming of age, we now have the mature, can't pay his bills Spider-Man that we all know and love, which is basically the Spider-Man PS4 game. I cannot wait to see where this goes. I'm incredibly excited to see, especially what Doctor Strange has in store. As of this recording, that movie has not come out yet, but I know Joe's Pizza's in there, baby. Let's go, Joe's Pizza. Pizza time. So this movie, for the For Real rating, is going to get a 6 out of 6. This movie has completely changed the Spider-Man formula. It has made the entire industry rethink how to plot out superhero stories. I think any directors going into superhero films should look at this trilogy, especially for younger characters, and use this as a template for future films. Now, Sony, hear me out. I know what you're doing, and I think everybody who's ready for it. Go ahead. Come on. All right, The Amazing Spider-Man 3. Let's go. The Amazing Spider-Man 3. Son of a bitch.